Welcome to the only made-for-video segment on our podcast. This is Epic Mail Day, a look into the world of home video collecting. Epic Mail Day even has its own Facebook group. Hit the address below and join the fun. In this segment, we will take a look at certain areas of my collection, seen here behind me, obviously. And we'll talk about some of the more interesting developments in the industry, and I'll have commentary on certain aspects of collecting and certain aspects of my collection. So I want to tell you a story how I got my collection started. When I was married the first time, I've been married twice, we didn't have much money starting out, like a lot of newlyweds. So my collection wasn't much to speak of. I maybe had 50 movies on DVD. At one point, I had 30 VHS movies, probably. You know, it wasn't much. And times were tough. I had to pawn off most of my VHS and DVD because we just didn't have the money, and we had just had a daughter. I mean, we were on government assistance for a while. So yeah, not an ideal situation. Long story short, you know, things didn't work out in that marriage, and we got a divorce. I was in a mountain of debt. But luckily I got all the debt taken care of in about a 6-year time period. And about that time is when I met my current wife. And things dramatically improved for me personally and for me financially, to the point where I felt like, from a financial standpoint, I was ready to dive back into home video collecting. And like I said, if you look behind me, you can tell that I took the reins and rode it hard. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the collection. We won't get too much into it because there's something else I want to talk about, and specifically VHSs that I now have back in my collection. But first, we'll take a quick tour, shall we? So as you can tell, I landed on VHS at the end of that little montage of my collection. And that's kind of brings us to where we are in the segment right now. I want to talk a little bit about VHS, which I love VHS. I'll always be a fan of the format. It just doesn't. The picture quality and sound just doesn't compare to a Blu-ray. So, but I still love it. And today, what I love about VHS are the first run copies that came out back in the day, the first editions. If I collect VHS now, that's what I go for, and that's pretty much all I go for, are the very first editions that came out originally. And I've got a stack of them here, and I'm just gonna kind of show you guys some of the ones that I've collected over the past couple years. It's not something I seek out. You know, if I see one, if I see it on eBay, if I see it in the wild, you know, and I can verify that it is the very first edition, I go ahead and probably grab it. If it's something if it's a film I really, really like. And all these movies, I like these movies. So basically, I'm just going to put the videotape in front of the camera and say a little something about each one. Some of them I may not have a whole lot to say. Like the first one, I don't have really a whole lot to say. I was going through a period of grabbing a lot of the Italian post-apocalyptic films from the early 80s. And this is a hard one to find on VHS. To my knowledge, there's only one version on VHS, and it's one of those, has one of those double packs. It's got 2 movies listed. It's out of print now, and it goes for crazy money. I found this cheap, and this is 2020 Texas Gladiators, which is, like I said, an Italian post-apocalyptic film. A lot of fun. But if you've seen those Italian films from the early 80s, you know it's cheap as hell. So, got that. Another movie I remember seeing back on Showtime when it first was available. Hadn't seen it since. It's one of the VHSs that I kind of held on to, because there was a DVD, but it sold out really fast. Of course, now Scream Factory has brought out their own Blu-ray of it, which I have. And this is Vice Squad from 1982. This film has recently come out on Blu-ray. But for years and years, it wasn't available on any format other than VHS. And I'll show you one of the things I like about the early VHSs that Media brought out, Media Home Entertainment, is, although this one isn't like it, I'll have to show you a different one. But what I like about these, and this is a completely poor example, we'll go back to this one. What I like about these is the case completely covers the videotape. Like, every side. So if you want to watch the film, you have to actually open this case to get to it. And I just think they did it for a little while, and then they quit doing it. Apparently, by the time The Dark came out, they didn't do it any longer. But I just think that's really cool. And the last videotape I'm going to show you is something that well, we'll get to it. It's something that I think is extremely cool. This is The Bride of Frankenstein. To my knowledge, this is the first edition of it. Believe it came out in the mid 80s. But we have that one. Like I said, not a whole lot to talk about. This might be. This is one of my prized possessions because it's one of the first films that was ever put on VHS to be sold. And I'll tell you a little story about that. But first, let's just show you what it is. It's Alien. It's a first edition of Alien. It was released in 1980 by Magnetic Video Corporation, which was a home video arm of 20th Century Fox. They were one of the first to ever release movies on VHS. They did, there's like MASH, Patton, The French Connection, Escape from New York was one of the first ones. I remember them releasing The Making of Star Wars. Just a bunch of them. And this is what I like about first editions, because a lot of them are so rare, and they're just fun to collect. But it can be an expensive hobby. This one right here, for instance, probably ran me $50 or $60, and it's not in good shape. As a matter of fact, it's in awful shape, if you can tell. That just kind of goes to show you what these VHSs, these first editions anyway, how much they're worth today. So we have that one. I have a couple more magnetics. I have, actually, I just have one other. It's a film from '79 called The Golden Girl. So here is another one of the medias. This is Blood Beach. It's never been released on DVD or Blu-ray. This is the only way you can see it, although there's bootlegs all over the internet. But this is the original VHS of it. It's one of the ones that I like because it's completely encased in its case, and you have to, So we have that one, and Blood Beach is a fun movie. One of my favorites from the early 80s is Mausoleum, which has recently had a Blu-ray released from Vinegar Syndrome, which one of these segments we'll talk about the boutique labels. That's a lot of fun. Especially there's one boutique label that is a train wreck. I won't divulge their name yet, but their initials are DFE. And we'll talk about that at some point. Anyway, here is Mausoleum. It came out in 83. The VHS came out in 84. And it was... Who released this? It was Nelson Entertainment. They released it. Let's see. So, this is a first edition of Halloween 2. One of my very first movies I ever rented on VHS. And one of my favorite Halloweens. So, this is like I said, a first edition. It came out in probably 82 sometime. Then we have Phantasm. It was released by Embassy, which, by the way, Nelson Entertainment, who released Mausoleum, is actually Embassy. So they just kind of changed their name. So this VHS, hang on. Yeah, this VHS actually came out in 84. And, all these are pan and scan versions, 4x3, cropped. Obviously, since that was the era we were in at the time. So anyway, there's that one. The next one I want to show you is one of my absolute favorite pieces of my collection. Because when Paramount Home Videos started producing VHS films, their cases were very unique because they were gatefold cases that completely encompassed the entire tape, just like the media's. Only this has a gatefold, which is really, really cool. And it's absolutely one of my most favorite 80s slashes of all time. It is My Bloody Valentine. It took me a long time to find this particular edition. The first editions of My Bloody Valentine are extremely rare. It wasn't cheap, but I can tell you whoever originally bought this. I bought this off eBay. Whoever bought this at Blockbuster. So even though this is an old first edition, whenever this individual bought this movie, it was probably around the time they went out of business. So anyway, let's get into this a little. So you open the gatefold, and on the other side, you have the video cassette. And I like the fact that they put a window in there so you can see the label on the cassette itself. And then on the other side is just a bunch of Paramount logos, which is kind of cool, I guess. Then, of course, you can see where it says My Bloody Valentine on the spine. And I don't know, I just think they're really neat. And like I said, they're so hard to get out of here. They're hard to find. They're very hard to find. So if you find one of these, consider yourself lucky. If I can ever get a hold of one of these that is Friday the 13th, the original, because by the time Part 2 came out, they quit doing this. If I could find a Friday the 13th gatefold, I would be an extremely happy camper. Well, guys, that was just a sneak peek of my collection. This is Epic Mail Day segment. We'll get back to it again on the next episode. And now, back to the podcast.